Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Jim Reynolds. JR is the voice of the Chattanooga Mocs and is live every morning on WGOW Talk 102.3 radio, along with Jed Mescon. JR, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before we get you to rate your co-host on Talk 102.3, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
What's in my morning cup?
Yeah,
a lot of caffeine every single day. Every single day.
Do you have a preference?
Of coffee, I just drink the rot gut that we have.
And that's the best kind.
That is the best kind. And it gets me going every single day, and it has for a long time.
You drink it black?
I drink it with a little bit of sweet and low, just a little bit, no cream, a little bit of sugar. And when I first started in radio, they go, JR, do you drink coffee? I said, no. They go, you will. And I think about it all the time and go, yeah, they were right, because I've been drinking coffee for 40-something years now.
Oh, and you've been doing mornings for all 40-something years, too. So, yeah, you need to get that going.
I hate it.
I think the only thing that could match radio station coffee is car dealer coffee.
I don't know. Ours is 24/7 most of the time, or at least it was back in the day. So I'm not sure. We might have the car dealers beat on that one.
Yeah, it kind of looks like you're changing the oil as it drips through.
Exactly.
Drips through the machine.
When it gets as thick as pancake syrup, then it's time to move on and maybe make a new pot. Maybe.
Well, thanks so much for coming in. I know we've been trying to connect for a while on this, and you're a local icon and a broadcast stalwart here in this town, and I really wanted to just kind of hear your story. I know you grew up in Illinois, so take us back to where in Illinois you grew up. Is it Elmwood Park?
Elmwood Park.
And where is that?
It's right on the border of Chicago. It's just north and east, right on the border. So we were right there.
Up near the lake?
Far away from the lake, far away from the lake. It was a very Italian neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
My dad used to say that we were the only non-Italians in Elmwood Park because there was a part of Chicago that was kind of Little Italy-esque, if you will.
South Chicago?
And they built the University of Illinois Chicago in that, and all the Italians were looking for a place to move, and they all moved to Elmwood Park when it was young and not really a full-fledged suburb as of yet. And so we were the only, as my dad said, Anglo-Saxons that were allowed.
Did you pick up any great Italian habits, preference on food or anything like that?
Food, yes. I knew some mafia members.
Did you?
Yes, I did. I knew their parents. I was just a kid.
Yeah.
But they go, so-and-so's dad, they didn't call it the mafia and they didn't call it Costa Nostra. They called it the syndicate. Oh. They go, so-and-so's dad's in the syndicate. I didn't know what that meant, but then I saw The Godfather and all that kind of stuff. I said, yeah. And then I've seen some documentaries. I go, yeah, I did know that guy. I know, that was Joey's dad or whatever it was. So, yeah.
I've got a bad habit of being interested in the mob movies, Goodfellas and The Godfather.
Yeah, me too.
And I just read the book Goodfellas was based on. Wise guy.
Yeah,
tremendous.
Yeah.
So you grew up with all of that. Talk about growing up. You said you had an older brother and a younger brother and sister. So talk a little bit about that growing up. What life was like in your family. Did you work as a kid and eventually how you got into broadcasting?
I've said this many times before. I grew up in an Ozzie and Harriet.
Oh, yeah.
And for all your listeners that are...
Madison's going, who the heck is Ozzie and Harriet?
Leave It to Beaver or whatever it is now, the Wonder Years type of family. My dad worked. My mom stayed home, and we ran around and be home when the streetlights are on. You could go anywhere you want in Elmwood Park. You'd roll your bike everywhere. If you've ever seen the movie The Sandlot, that was my life. We went and played baseball every day. It was really, when I think about it now, how fortunate I was and how unusual it really was. I had two parents that cared about me, up until my dad died when I was a senior. So every day we had to be home 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, bang, bang, 6 o'clock, because dinner was going to be served at 6 o'clock. And I mean, you're going to have a meat, you're going to have a vegetable, it was, and we had a bell outside of our back deck in our house. And if that bell rang 2 times, then 3 times, that was our signal. You need to come home. So yeah, if I heard ding, 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 whoops, gotta go. We'd be playing whatever we were doing. And that bell resonated throughout the neighborhood, I was never more than 2 or 3 blocks away anyway. If I heard that bell, get on the bike, get your brothers and get your sister and go home.
So did you become like Pavlov's dog? And today when you hear a bell,
my mouth starts watering a little bit sometimes. If I hear it in that sequence, and I have a few times, I go, I start looking around. Are the street lights on? Am I supposed to be home? Am I in trouble? Yeah.
If you were late, did you miss dinner?
You didn't miss dinner, but there were consequences usually. It was better off not to find out. So we all had our chores, so you might get doubled up on the chores a little bit.
You mentioned your life was very similar to the Sandlot. Was baseball your game?
Baseball was my game. We played baseball. I mean, in the summer, we played every day. And I mean, it was just we would meet at the school. We'd choose sides, we'd play baseball, go home for lunch, and then we go to the high school at a swimming pool that you could become a member of, and we did that. And so we played baseball in the morning, swam in the afternoon, went and had dinner, and then ran around and did something at night.
So as a kid growing up, you're playing a lot of sports, and I'm sure you idolized the Cubbies because you're in town.
Well, see, that hurts me because I'm a big White Sox fan.
Oh, man.
In Chicago, it's like Alabama and Auburn.
Yeah.
You got to choose a side. You can't say, well, I kind of like them both. You were one way or the other. And we had 4 kids in our family. We were split 2 and 2. So me and my little sister were White Sox fans, and my other 2 brothers were Cub fans. And that's the way it was that's what we would argue about. We didn't argue about politics. We didn't argue about this and that. We argued Cubs and White Sox all the time.
You may be offended by this question.
I probably will be.
How do you become a White Sox fan? I think that's an uphill battle.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
I chose the road less traveled, as Robert Frost would say. Here's the reason. The White Sox were owned by Bill Veeck, who was an innovator. No question about that. And you could watch both the Cubs and White Sox in that day on WGN, which became the Superstation. But at that time, we had the 4 channels. Most people only had 3, but we were in Chicago, so we had 4. So you could see the Cubs and White Sox every day. And the White Sox, when they hit a home run, they blew off fireworks.
Yeah.
And I said, why would I root for a non-fireworks team when I can root for a fireworks team? So my passion was we would go to White Sox, and when we went, we all went. So I would go to Cubs games with my brothers and friends, and no one's parents would let them do that today because my brother was like 11 and I was 9.
He was in charge too.
Yeah, no question. And we'd get on the bus and we'd go to Wrigley Field and then we'd watch the game and then we'd come home and my parents knew it's not like we were going behind their back. And they just figured, they'll make it home somehow. And we always did.
Yeah, you were where you're supposed to be. So is baseball your first love?
Yes. Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm one of those. See, I was smart. One of the few things I can say I was smart about was we all collected baseball cards.
Yeah.
And my mom, of course, wanted to throw all of ours away at some point in time. And I stole all my brother's baseball cards before my mom could throw them out. And I'm sure I have some cards that are worth.
Oh, I bet you do.
That worth good money. Like I went to my there was a guy that came by my house and I said, here's a little bit of my collection. And I just picked out a card. I go, what's this worth? He goes, probably $25. I go, well, I've got 8 of them, and I've got a lot of stuff like that. I'm sure there's a card or two that's worth $500 or $1,000 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Probably the best investments I've made in my life. Not gold, not silver, not stocks, no 401k, but Topps baseball cards. That may lead me to some sort of retirement in Florida somewhere.
See, we ruined ours by putting them in the spokes.
We
of
did
our
that
cars.
too.
Yeah,
but I only did that with the Cubs players. I did that with doubles. I mean, if you got doubles, which means if you had doubles, you'd put them in the bike tire.
Who was your favorite White Sox?
I had 2 or 3. Probably Bill Melton, who just passed. Louis Aparicio is probably my favorite of all time, who is, I think, the first Venezuelan shortstop. And he's a member of the Hall of Fame. And he was the shortstop, and Nellie Fox was the second baseman. So I still have a picture of them in my office, in my room. So I've always been enamored with shortstops that could really field.
Were you doing any odd jobs growing up, like cutting yards or things like that? Or was it more, as you said, Ozzie and Harriet, and you were just out with your friends?
Well, yeah, we were Ozzie and Harriet, but I mean, my parents kind of made me do something. Yeah. So I would babysit, when I was a little bit older for the neighbors, just so they would have someone else there. And I did cut grass. Yeah. I never had the paper route, so I never did that. But I was, I guess I was 15, maybe 16, that I started working, and I was a busboy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I've been a good tipper ever since that time, because you'd work with the servers and the busboys, and they'd all work together. Those people work hard. They're on their feet for a long time, taking a lot of grief from unhappy customers. So.
And they make below minimum wage.
Yeah, they didn't make diddly squat even at that time.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So you're growing up, the prototypical American life, things are going well. Then you get hit when you're, a senior in high school, 17 years old?
I was a senior in high school, and my dad died. Yeah. And I remember it really well in the fact that me and my little brother, Rick, we were on the cross-country team. We were running cross-country. And all of a sudden, one of our neighbors comes to the school right after a cross-country meet. And I go, this can't be good. And they told me my dad had passed away. My dad committed suicide.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was saying, for a 17-year-old guy, you're still trying to figure out the world.
Right.
Some people think you have it figured out. You think you have it figured out sometimes, and then the next day you don't have a clue. And the person I was really close with, as far as an authority figure, was my dad. And my dad committed suicide.
Well, and you're growing older, and you're probably growing closer to him, seeing each other, seeing yourself as almost a peer.
I wasn't there yet, but I was looking forward to the time where I could be. Because we would have talks. My dad was one of those that lied about his age to get in the Navy.
Oh, wow. So
when Pearl Harbor was bombed.
So
he was in the Navy at a young age. And every so often, he would tell a story. I mean, think about this. Having a conversation with my dad, and very casually he goes, I killed 4.
Oh, wow.
I just say, what? He never mentioned that. The one and only time he mentioned was one time he goes, yeah, I killed 4. Yeah. And I was just like, wow, there's some stories there I want to hear.
Yeah, and you didn't get a chance to hear those.
No.
So when the neighbor shows up and you're there with your little brother, did that big brother thing kick in for you that, this is something that's happened to us and our family that you know?
I think our family handled it really, really well. Because a lot of times when there's suicide in a situation like that, you start blaming someone.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone ever blamed themselves for, I think all of us probably said, and you wouldn't be human if you didn't say, what could I have done? Could I have made a difference? Could I have stopped it? He left our house because his business wasn't doing well. And so he felt bad about the financial. I put the family in this financial, and we were all like, Dad, we'll get out of it somehow.
Right.
And but he felt bad and drove to Wisconsin, went in some hotel, took 1,000 sleeping pills, and they found him 2 or 3 days later. And of course he did that, so my mom would get all this insurance money, which she did.
Yeah.
And she lived on that. But
I'm sorry, JR, that's a hard thing to go through.
It's a hard thing to go through, but I just look at it this way. It was easier for me than it probably was. I mean, my mom all of a sudden, she's got 4 kids.
Yeah.
She got 4 kids to raise.
Yeah.
And she didn't have a job. My older brother was off at school, so didn't realize what was going on. And my younger brother and younger sister didn't have the benefit of my dad's presence for as long as I did. So, I mean, I could say, yeah, I had it tough. And yeah, I did, but I didn't have it tougher than the other people that were going through it, including my mom, who's the one that, did say, so, what could I have done?
So how did that change things for you? Because you're a senior in high school, you're looking at your future, and all of a sudden you've got added responsibility, I'm sure.
Yeah, it changed everything for me. So here's what happens. So I was going to go to work for my dad. That's not what I wanted to do.
And what was the business?
He was into the beverage business, and they sold soda pop. And my dad bought it from, my dad was really into politics. I should say that. My dad was super into politics. He knew everybody. When you see about those smoky back rooms, my dad was sitting in that room and he was smoking a cigarette. When he died, he was the campaign manager for the president of the Illinois Senate. So one of the people he went into was another politician guy who ended up double-crossing him. So my dad thought he put in all this sweat equity, and now it's time to help me cash in. And that guy goes, no, we're not going to do that. And that's what led to my dad's financial downfall. Yeah. So I'm running cross country at the time, and I had planned to just go to work with my dad. And my dad thought that I would be adrift anyway. So he goes, well, you'll work for me, and I'll help you get a living. So all of a sudden, my dad's gone. The business is gone. It's my senior year. I didn't take any SAT or ACT because I'm just going to go to work for my dad and maybe take some junior college courses, blah, blah, blah. The break I got was the coaches of my cross-country team. We had just a couple of counselors at Elmwood Park High School. They were the two counselors. So after my dad gets buried and all that kind of stuff, and we're still running cross-country, and then the season's over, they called me in. They go, what are you going to do now? And I did the old, I have no earthly idea. And this is like, my dad died in October of my senior year. So in, a couple of weeks later, maybe in November, something like that, they go, well, what do you want to do? I mean, I said, well, I was going to do this, and now I'm not going to do this. Yeah. And they said, what do you like? I said, well, I've always thought about being in sports broadcasting. And they said, well, I know Illinois State has a good broadcasting program. You could probably get in, which I led that to mean that they'd take anyone, which they obviously did. So they signed me up, and I had to go to another school to take the SAT, on a Saturday or something like that. And so they helped me get the application in. So I applied, I got accepted, and I went to Illinois State, and I knew nobody, which was scary going in. Because most people I know, they know somebody at the school they go, or there's a reason they go there. And I knew nobody, nobody. And it probably turned out to be the best thing that ever happened, because all of a sudden you're in a, what am I doing here? I've got to succeed. Because finances were tight after my dad died. I didn't want to let my family down. Right. Because they paid the tuition for my first year and a half. And so, I just felt the obligation. Plus, they didn't know if I was going to make it, in all honesty. They said, he'll. Did
you have an interest in broadcasting before you said to those counselors, oh, well, I kind of always like sports. So what bug bit you to get you interested in broadcasting?
I was one of those guys that would sneak the transistor radio in their bed, and I'd be listening to games at night, and my parents said, hey, you're supposed to be in bed. And I'd be listening to White Sox or Cubs or, whoever was playing. So I was one of those guys, and I got enamored in it a little bit.
So when they asked, had you done any broadcasting at that point? So it was just, zero. Well, this kind of interests me.
Yeah. I mean, it was the only thing that interests me at that point. I said, I don't know what I could do. I know my attention span, I couldn't be an accountant or an insurance salesman or something like that. So I had to be something where it was going to be active. And I'm one of those, if I'm not passionate about it, I'm terrible at it. Yeah. And some people can fake it or, switch gears in some ways. But if I'm not passionate about them, I'm not very good at it. So I felt like, I don't know if I knew this at the time, that it would have to be something I really enjoyed. I couldn't just do something to make a living that I didn't have a passion for.
But prior to getting to Illinois State, you really hadn't done any broadcasting,
None.
Right?
Zero.
So when you get there and you start to get into the curriculum, was it what you expected?
It really was. One of the best stories. This is a good story about my mom and me and going to college. So I was going out with a girl at the time, and she was fantastic. She went to church with the guy that was the beat writer for the Chicago White Sox. And his name was Richard Dozier, and he wrote for the Tribune. So for my birthday, which is May 1st, and I knew none of this, she set it up where Richard Dozier, the beat writer for the White Sox, was going to take me under his wing one day, and we went to a game, I think it was on a Sunday, And he just took me in the dugout and, showed me around and introduced me to everyone. And I was in the dugout and I was in the training room and I was talking to players. And who comes along but Harry Caray? So Harry Caray, and Richard Dozier says to Harry Caray, legendary broadcaster.
Because he did the Sox before he did the Cubs.
He did St. Louis, then he did Oakland, then he did the White Sox and switched to the Cubs. And so Richard Dozier says to Harry Caray, says, Harry, meet one of my neighbors, blah, 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 blah. This is Jim, and he wants to take your job one day, blah, 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 blah. And so Harry goes, son, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm going to college. I'm going to Illinois State University. He goes, son, that's the biggest waste of time you could ever have. Get behind a microphone. My Harry Caray's gotten better with age, I'll say that.
Sounds good.
And he says, don't do that. Don't do that. Get behind a microphone. That's what you need to do. So I get all excited, and I go home. I said, Mom, Harry Caray says going to college is a big waste of time. I should get behind a microphone. And the best line my mom ever said, guess what? Harry Caray is not your mother. You are going to college. You are going to do this, and we are going to stick to this plan. Yes, Mom. Yes, Mom, we are going to do that. So the Harry Caray is not your mother was the line that I remember my mom by all the time.
Harry Caray is not your mother.
That's exactly right.
I mean, how can you go wrong with Harry Caray saying, son? That's a great story. So you went through the program then?
Yeah, I got to Illinois State, and I just, first of all, excelled, was passionate about it. I'm one of those that I don't grasp things quickly. It really takes me a long time to get good at something. And I'm not just saying that's absolutely true. It takes me, repetition. And so I did a lot of stuff at Illinois State. They had a student radio station, and I went and applied there the first week I was there. And, I got a shift, and I got to do radio production and all that kind of stuff. So I got my hands a little wet, and then got an internship and worked there under a guy that was great, who helped me out a lot, was really good at helping young people emerge a little bit. And he would, go to cover this meeting and write a story and then cut a voicer on that, and we'll run it in the newscast the next day. And he would be critical of, you should have done this, why'd you do this, and all that kind of stuff. But I learned a bunch.
So was your focus sports, or was it more journalism?
The funny thing is, I didn't do sports at all. I would cover sports, but I didn't do play-by-play. So I would cover, I went to Illinois State and Illinois Wesleyan are in the same town. So they would cover, the radio station would cover those sports, but we would do a sportscast in the morning where we would air interviews, bites, and stuff like that. So I'd interview coaches, and then I'd edit it, and I'd put it on a cart, and I'd leave it for the guy, and I'd write the story and leave my stuff there as an intern. And it's something I really enjoyed, covering the sports, but I was covering the school board meeting and county commission and, the politician that came in town, all that kind of stuff. So it was really a journalistic background of covering news.
That probably gave you a great advantage to the guys who just did sports.
I think so. To this day, I think so. So then what happened? So that station that I worked at was owned by a guy by the name of Alan Jackson. Now, not the country singer. Alan Jackson was a CBS News correspondent. He was buddies with Walter Cronkite and all those guys. I forget, Douglas Edwards. You think all Roger Mudd and all them. He was the London correspondent for CBS News.
It's pretty good gig.
Yes. If you look up the first words of the Kennedy assassination were done by Alan Jackson, who told me the story. And he said, I was just on duty that day, and we always, CBS News, middle of the afternoon, and when the AP machine, when it rang those 5 bells, he goes, I was standing next to the AP machine, the Associated Press machine, with the wire coming off, and I heard those 5 bells, and they grabbed it and said, go on the air. And he said, you can go online and YouTube or something and hear, if you Google Alan Jackson and the Kennedy assassination, he was the absolutely first one to put it out nationwide, and he was working for CBS News.
So he had the first bulletin.
Yes.
Yeah, and for folks who may be listening to this don't know what an AP machine is. It's kind of like Twitter, but it had it had
a lot of paper
and ribbons. And,
yes.
And it was only in newsrooms.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, there's 5 bells. And you're back to bells. You had your bells calling you for dinner.
Yes,
and your other bells calling you for that. So was this the station you were interning at?
Yes. So it was Alan Jackson's station I was interning at. And then Alan Jackson died. They sold the station. So another group comes in. And I'm working news. Alan Jackson hired me. This means I've been undervalued my entire life. Alan Jackson hires me to do news. And he says, Jim, we're really budgeted to pay $100 a week, but I like you. So we're going to give you $125.
Ooh.
Whoa. So anyway, I'm poor and struggling, but doing news, loving it. So Alan Jackson dies. They sell the radio station. Another group goes in, and they're going to do a lot of sports. Aside from news, they're going to do a lot of sports play-by-play. And they said, we need someone to do that, maybe a couple people, because they were going to do a lot of high school sports and 2 colleges in town. We had a basketball game on the air almost every day of the week, except for Sunday. So we were doing a lot. So they needed people, and they said, we will pay an additional $10 for play-by-play. I said, 10?
There you go.
Where do I sign up? By gosh. And I had never done it before. And so there was a guy that trained me, and all of a sudden I'm doing a gazillion games every week. And that's how I got good at it, or at least proficient at it quickly, because I was doing it almost every night.
What year was that when you first did play-by-play?
Probably 77. Yeah, because I graduated from college in 77. That's when they came in.
You ever go back and listen to that tape, or do you have it?
Oh, I don't have the guts to do it. I do have some tapes of me, but they're on cassette, and I'm not sure where my cassette recorder is.
And what's the key to good play-by-play?
I told a young person just the other day, just tell them what you see. And I've told people recently, I said, you know what? You're not the coach. You don't have to impress people. I said this at UTC. There was a fan at UTC. Her name was Millie. And Millie has since passed away. But Millie, when I knew her, was 6. She was old. I said, Millie doesn't care about if the pulling guard is there. She wants to know what color the uniforms are. She wants to know if it's grass and what the grass smells like and all that kind of stuff. So just tell them what you see. Don't try to impress people. And the old thing in play-by-play and a lot of other things is just make them feel like they're there.
Yeah.
Because most of the time people want to be there. They are jealous of you first and foremost. They want to be there. They want to see that game for other reasons, for whatever reason they can't. So try to make them feel like they're there.
So are you in love with what you're doing at this point?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did you ever think back to those 2 counselors who said, what are you going to do?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I do to this day. Yeah. To this day I do. And saying, you know what? I probably never thanked them enough that, and they were doing their job, but they liked me because I ran cross country for them. So they knew me better than they probably knew a lot of other students. And I don't think they did for me something they would not have done for anyone else. But they just, kept me between the ditches a little bit and saw that I would have been wandering who knows where. And they just gave me just a little bit of structure at that point in time when I had none.
Yeah, because you could have said, I don't know, and they could have left it at that.
Yeah, exactly.
And they go, well, where's Jim today?
Yeah.
So you did the internship, you got the job with the station with Alan Jackson. He dies, someone new comes in and buys. Is that what gets you to Chattanooga?
Kinda. Yeah. Kinda. So I'm doing play-by-play, and the co-owner of our radio station owns his hobby. He was a millionaire, and he owned banks and lumber yards and blah, 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 blah. His hobby was doing play-by-play, and he did play-by-play for the University of Illinois.
Wow.
Pretty big
Must
deal.
Be pretty good.
He owned the network. He owned the network. So, and what happened was he knew everyone. He knew everyone in broadcasting, especially in sports broadcasting in the Midwest. The guy at Notre Dame, I think, got sick and was going to be gone for a season. So they asked my boss, Dick Martin, the guy that owned the network who had done Illinois, would you do Notre Dame? and help this guy. Yeah, sure, I'll do it for a year because the other guy was going to recoup. So they needed someone to do Illinois, and the only one they had in their chain that they liked was me.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, I'm doing high school. Then the next year, I'm doing Illinois Wesleyan. And the next year, I'm doing Illinois. So, I mean...
You're doing Big Ten at a pretty young age.
I'm doing Big Ten at a pretty young age, but I knew it was only going to be 1 year.
Yeah, but what an experience.
Yeah, no question. It was the year after Magic Johnson left Michigan State. It was that year. I mean, there was a senior at the University of Minnesota by the name of Kevin McHale. I mean, I covered some guys that went on and made it big time in the NBA and elsewhere. So there was a station across town. We were getting killed in the ratings, by the way. We were getting killed. And I mean, the station across town, which was WJBC, they would kill us every time. They were one of the top percentage of audience ratings winners in the country. They would get 60s and 70s and 80s. We'd get a 5. We'd get a 5. So they offered me a job. They liked me across town. Offered me a job to do news and do play-by-play. And I turned them down. And their jaws dropped.
Yeah.
And
they're number one station by a long...
And it wasn't even close. And they paid more, and they had all the... But I wanted to make sure that I could do that Illinois thing.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm gonna fulfill this Illinois thing and just see what it's all about. And then after that, I'll figure out what I'm going to do. So when I turned them down, they said, they were surprised too, because no one ever turned them down at that point. And they said, well, we're trying to buy some radio stations in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we're trying to get the rights, play-by-play radio rights for the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. If that happens, would you be interested? I said, sure.
Did you even know where Chattanooga was?
I did not know where Chattanooga was. I mean, I knew it was in Tennessee. I knew the Chattanooga Choo-Choo. That was about it. So, like 6 months goes by, the season gets over, and they call me up, and they go, we got the stations, we got the rights. Fantastic. And they said, would you be interested? I go, I don't know. I have no idea. But my wife and I had planned to take a trip to Disney World at the end of the season.
And guess where you got to drive through?
Absolutely. He goes, we'll put you up. I go, hey, that's one less than a hotel. I'm making that $125, remember, and the $10 for those games. So it's not like the life of luxury that we're living. So he goes, we'll put you up, and, all we want to do is interview you and talk to you and all that kind of stuff. I said, yeah, you put me up for a night? I'm halfway to Disney World. And I got here, and I just liked it. Yeah. I mean, I liked Chattanooga.
So you got here in what, 82?
I came here in 80.
80?
So, yeah, my first year was 80. So I liked the city. I liked the people at the radio station, and I liked the university. Mm-hmm. And I've said this many times. I grew up in Chicago, and people in Chicago were really loyal. I went to school in Bloomington Normal, worked in Peoria a little bit. I said, but I never talked to anyone that were as loyal to their hometown as people were in Chattanooga. And I said, it really intrigued me. And it intrigues me to this day how loyal people are. And I just liked everything about it. And we worked out a deal. And I went on and thought about it when I was on the rides at Disney World and
the
all that.
The teacup ride.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so back to your point of people who are loyal to Chattanooga. Was it that way in the 80s when Chattanooga was nowhere close to being where it is today and was actually suffering through manufacturing jobs leaving, being a dirty city and all that?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know why in a lot of ways, but they certainly were. And I mean, turn back the clock for 45 years, and Chattanooga downtown had boarded up buildings. And again, you mentioned the manufacturing. Those jobs were leaving, but it was still a dirty city. And obviously it's before the aquarium and before the, downtown got renovated and pretty and nice, and before people really embraced the riverfront and all those kind of things. But still, people were extremely loyal to this city. I
remember when I was actually interviewing for a job here, and a guy in radio in Memphis had worked here in the 80s. Mm-hmm. You probably don't know him, a guy named Jimmy Wilmer. And I knew he had worked here, and I said, Jimmy, what do you think about Chattanooga? Oh, my God, the worst place on earth. Why in the world would anyone go there?
That's not what you want to hear, yeah.
That's not what I want to hear when I'm getting ready to interview. But to your point, you get here and you go, this is a little bit different. I can handle this.
Yeah, you can get anywhere in 20 minutes or, different parts of town. I don't know what it was. Or maybe they had a vision, or maybe it was just, maybe folks here are the salt of the earth or whatever it is. But that really resonated with me, how loyal people were. And I remember one time when Coach Wilkes was the athletic director at UTC, when he hired Buddy Nix, he says, if you stay here a year, you'll love it. If you stay here 2 years, you'll live here the rest of your life. And he's not the head coach at UTC anymore, and he still lives at Council Fire. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that kind of town. So you get here in the 80s. Talk about the radio station and what you were doing. I know you were doing UTC play-by-play.
Right.
But you show up at a new radio station, and who was the ownership group?
The ownership group was the group from Bloomington. So it was Bloomington Broadcasting, which they've been sold a couple of times, and now we are what we are, Cumulus. But yeah, and their idea was they liked medium markets. They didn't like real small markets. They didn't like huge markets because of the, there's a lot to invest in that. Mm-hmm. They had stations in Evansville, and they started Chattanooga. I think they had a station in Rockford, Illinois, and then they started their own, eventually bought some stations in Johnson City. So they were pretty clear with the plan that they had. They liked medium markets, and they liked to outproduce everyone in the market and hire people. And I just remember early on, so they're still playing music, adult contemporary at that time on an AM. So it was just KZ106 on the FM, and KZ106 was only a couple of years old, and WGOW adult contemporary music on the AM side. So the AM side was a little bit more news and sports, but it wasn't all talk by any stretch of the imagination. It was a lot of music.
So in addition to play-by-play, did you have a shift?
I did sports during morning drive.
Okay.
So 5-minute sportscast with actualities and this and that and the other, because there's no cable at that time. Yep. It was something people couldn't get unless they went to that old AP wire machine, which I did, and rewrote stories. And so it was a full-service morning show.
Well, and to your point, when people couldn't get it, the big change, particularly for television sports, we had Darrell Patterson in a week or two ago.
I'm sorry.
Well, he said to tell you hello. But once people had that Braves score available through the internet,
right,
it became useless to do it at 11:25 at night.
Right.
Everyone who really wanted to know what the Braves score was already knew.
Yeah.
So it completely changed how sports was reported, at least on television.
I think ESPN, when they celebrated their, 25th anniversary, they said, and they were patting themselves on the back, 25 years, and then they said, the one thing we did do, we killed that local sports.
Yeah.
Killed that, because you've already seen the highlights 18 times. When I was a kid, maybe when you were, I stayed up and watched those highlights now.
Oh, yeah.
10 o'clock news on Central Time is where I grew up in Chicago, but 10:15 or whatever it is, I wanted to see what was going on, that home run or that play in the field and all that kind of stuff. But now I click on my phone, and 2 clicks later, I've seen it 18 times.
Well, and to your point on local sports, it really had eliminated most of their content.
Yeah.
And the smart stations
reinvented themselves.
They did. They covered the local college.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So take me through your Mocs play-by-play. You were doing both football and basketball?
Uh-huh.
And what were the Mocs doing at this time? I know you probably got to know Terrell Owens and folks like that.
Yes, absolutely. So when I arrived at UTC, first of all, there's no roundhouse. It's under construction. Mm. And they told me that. I could see the construction. They said, well, you're going to be a couple of years at McClellan Gym. And I remember looking around and just thought, I covered with better facilities other places. So the first couple of years I'm at McClellan Gym, but all of a sudden at that time, Mocs basketball especially, they caught lightning in a bottle. They recruit the best recruiting class they ever have, and people are going to the games, and it's exciting. And the first year I'm there, they go to the NCAA tournament. And the next year they go to the NCAA tournament, and Gerald Wilkins comes along. And so many things were happening. It was so much fun. And they embraced me. One of the things, UTC embraced me. I mean, I love their coaches, and you were kind of part of that family, and you would get on a bus and with the team, and there weren't as many suits then as there are now, and everyone had their job and did their stuff, and then we'd get back on the bus and come back home, and we had a lot of fun at that time, no question.
It definitely made you part of the team.
Yeah, oh yeah, part of the family.
Were you here when they won the national championship, the basketball team?
That was 77, so that was just a little bit before I got here.
But you got here in the Gerald Wilkins years.
Yes,
which were exciting.
Willie White and Gerald Wilkins and all those kind of stuff, and getting to the NCAA tournament, I just thought that was the greatest thing in the world, to be part of it and broadcasting a NCAA tournament game when we went to Dayton and we went to Indianapolis, and all of a sudden you're big time. You're in the spotlight.
So to talk a little bit about how difficult it is to do play-by-play and the morning shift.
Just time-wise it is, because people, like anything else, if you're prepared means you're confident. And that's the way I always look at it in the stuff I do. And I prepare to this day 2, 3, 4 hours for a basketball game, mm-hmm. Every game, every day.
What's that entail?
Well, in this day and age, it entails going to websites and going over teams and watching their highlights or their games, mm-hmm. or something like that, and just making sure you know the other team, what the injuries are, who's playing well, who's not playing well, the coaches for both sides, and how they play, their style of play. So you have to know all the guys individually and their stats and this kind of stuff. And I was teaching a kid the other day, and I just said, it's easy to find all that stuff, but think about this. Okay, so-and-so is just shot a three-pointer, and he just made a three-pointer. Well, he's only 1 for 10 from three-point range. The information is there. You have to find a way to make it accessible in 5 seconds' time. So everything I have in front of me. I do have a pile, like I can search for papers, but by that time, mm-hmm. you've run a commercial and you're doing some research or whatever it is, and that moment's gone.
Yeah.
So you have to have stuff in you that is accessible within 5 or 10 seconds, or it's worthless.
I saw something online that Tim Brando and others have, I call it a board.
Everyone calls it the board.
Yeah.
It's a glorified cheat sheet is all it is. So mine's a little bit different than his, but everyone that does it has one. And it is just a cheat sheet. So mine, I do one team in red, one team in blue, say for football. So then I flip them over. Some people do it on just a manila folder, and they flip them over that way. But you've got all the starting personnel, so I know who the center is, this guy. I know who the receivers are, the quarterback. I know their schedule and I know their stats, and so I can access that in seconds of time. Brando and everyone else, Bob Kessling, Mike Keith, you start naming them, West Durham, they've all got some sort of board, some sort of glorified cheat sheet in front of them.
And that's a result of all the research they did going in, knowing which players got what. Yes. They're not just coming.
No. People ask me, how do you memorize all that stuff? I go, I don't. I don't.
So you've been doing play-by-play for 45 years?
45 years in Chattanooga and a few years before that.
And how long you been doing mornings at the station? That same amount of time?
Every morning.
How much has it changed?
It's changed in the fact that everyone wants to get so political.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost. I'm a conservative guy, but I think what we've gotten away from is we've turned it into a football game.
Right. One team or the other.
I think we have to me, the best way to approach what we do now is we all want to get to the same place, right? We want to be safe and secure. We want our kids educated. We want, high tide raises all boats. I think we need to get to the point of thinking, I have a different way of getting there than you do. Okay, we want to get to Atlanta. We want to get to Nashville. Maybe you want to take the interstate and I want to take the back roads, but we still want the best for our community. We just have different ways of doing it. This doesn't make, if you're not of my mindset, that doesn't make you the bad guy. That's just you have a different approach than I do. And I think if we get back to that, saying this guy wants your kids to be healthy, wealthy, and wise, right? We all want that. If you get to the point of saying, you know what, he's not the enemy. He just wants to get there in a different path. I think if we all get to the point of saying, I respect you and I disagree with you. You know what? Instead of saying you're an idiot and you're wrong, we've turned every single incident into red versus blue. And like I said, we've turned it into a cheerleading thing and turned it into a football game. And I think we hear a lot of noise, and we try to tune out the noise a lot of times. We don't get as down and dirty as because we live here.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that most people, there's some scoundrels out there, and
absolutely,
you and I both met them, but for the most part, people want this. They want this goal that we all want. We just want our kids to be, kids to be fed, and they want them to be smart. I tell my kids I want them to be smart and make a lot of money so they can support me in my old age, which is coming very, very quickly. But I think if we get away from this, you're the enemy. You're on my side, and you're the enemy. I think if we get away from that, we'll all be better off.
I think you make a tremendous point, and I couldn't agree with you more. I do have two more questions before we run out.
I got all day.
Well, we can stay all day if you like. I want you to talk a little bit about, and I mentioned this when we were talking earlier, why sports guys are the hardest working guys in the building. And I'm saying this because you're doing the morning show, and then tomorrow you got to drive to Spartanburg, South Carolina, do play-by-play, and then come back and be ready for your shift at what time you show up at the station?
5-ish.
So you got to be in Spartanburg for a tip-off at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And you're driving.
Yeah.
And the game's going to be 2 hours, probably.
Yeah.
So just kind of walk us through that.
If you don't have a passion for it,
either
the morning show but especially sports, if you don't enjoy it, if it's not something special, would you do it for free? I ask myself that. The answer is no most of the time, but
125 a week.
Yeah, I was going to say, I enjoy being around the people. I have joked before, I'm a 69-year-old man, and I have more 25 and 30-year-old African-American friends than anyone my age. Why? Because I've been there and I've talked to them. We've made friends, and you go down that path.
You travel together.
Yeah, you're with them, and I joke with them all the time, and they kind of know how to take me after a while. If you don't enjoy that, and again, I say every game for me is just one little soap opera because you prepare, then there's the game, and there's personalities involved. But at the end of the night, someone won, someone lost, bam, tied up in a bow, and then you move on to the next game. So it's one little, I guess you binge watch what's on Netflix or whatever, but it's one little episode that you get to do so many times with people I really like, I really enjoy. They respect me, I respect them. They help me when they can, I help them when they can. So we all have the same mission again. Here's that. We all have the same mission of I want to do the broadcast and do it well. They want me to do it well. They want to win. I want them to win because if they win, my life is easy because they're in better moods, trust me. But there's going to come a time where I say, you know what? I'd rather be at home on the couch than doing this game. And when that time comes, then we'll have some retirement party somewhere.
Well, and you brought up a very important word, passion.
Yeah.
I think
no question.
To be able to drive there, do the game, and then be back for your morning shift, you've obviously got a passion for both of the things that you're doing. And I'm sure that washes a lot of people out of your business too, that after a while they just don't have the passion anymore.
I've had friends of mine retire recently and just said, there comes a point in time where I've done enough. And again, I joked with former basketball coach John Schulman. I said, why I'm divorced? Because I've spent the last 5 Valentine's Days with you. And there's that. I had to schedule one of my kids' cesarean session during the open date in football. So there's things like that. I've missed anniversaries and birthdays because there's a game. I used to joke and, someone say, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to have a party. We're going to do that. I don't have to pull out a schedule card to say if I'm available. My youngest daughter plays lacrosse, and I go, okay, I can go to this game, not this game, and I've got this. So there's a lot of time.
Takes you away from family.
There's time involved, and I already know what my football schedule is for next year. So I've done some of those things. But if you don't really if you don't have a passion for it, you can't put up with, you just can't.
Yeah.
Because there's so many. And I'm one of those, I get there 2 or 3 hours before a game. So, football, our minimum is 2 hours before kickoff or 2 hours before we go on the air. And we do a 1 hour pregame. So we're a minimum of 3 to 4 hours before a game. So if you have a 12 noon kickoff, we're there at 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
We set up our own equipment, and then we do that. And then, so if you're doing a road game, we've left at 4 a.m. or whatever it is, driven to where we got into, set up our equipment, done our game, and driven back. So there's some 10 and 12 and 15-hour days sometimes.
Very glamorous.
I showed, like I told you, I was showing a high school kid. I said, here's the part that nobody sees.
Yeah.
We're there early, and I made him get there early. Here's what we have to do. We're going to go interview the coach, and we're going to do the last-minute prep work, and then everyone's gone. I know everyone that cleans up at the arena, everyone, because we talk after the game. Sometimes it's just me and them.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm breaking down my equipment, and they're cleaning the bleachers. They're getting the blowers out and blowing the popcorn off.
They're blowing you out.
Yeah, sometimes.
Time to go, Jim.
That's happened too.
Before I get to my last question, Jim, I want to remind listeners who makes all this possible. And it's a huge thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. All right, last question for you. What would you tell that 25-year-old Jim Reynolds is important for a happy life?
I tried to do things too fast sometimes, meaning, you know what, things will happen. I always had to run out and get it. And if I could do it, I would slow it down a little bit. I'm one of those that I would enjoy some other things that I had. Instead of maybe spending that Valentine's Day with a basketball coach and doing a show, maybe I could find some better way to do that. But I've joked and said one of my pluses and minuses, if I put you down in the date book, you're in. Like I said, my schedule's already in for next football season.
Yeah.
But every so often I need to write in my daughter's birthday on that date book and make sure I spend that time with her, and all. So I always felt that obligation, but I didn't give enough obligation to the kids or their softball games. And I went to as many as I could. I never sat at home while they were playing or they were doing a concert, all that kind of stuff. But I would tell myself, just slow down a little bit. It'll be okay.
That's great advice, because I think most successful people like yourself, as we get towards the end of our careers, look back and say, you know what, I really didn't need to be. And my big eye opener for me was a similar thing of turning down a trip to go see Tennessee play Oregon.
Uh-huh.
I felt like I needed to be in the office.
Yeah.
And that week I sat at my desk.
Let me give you a story, and this magnifies this. My little brother Rick and I were tight. And so Rick is going to get married. He's going to get married in October. And he asked me, Jim, be my best man. I get my schedule card out, and I say, can't. Got a game that day.
Oh.
He's like, what? I said, I got a game that day. I said, Pat Summerall works on Christmas Day, and John Madden works on Christmas Day. And I said, you know what? In this day and age, there are 2 people on this planet that know that Jim Reynolds broadcast the game that day. Me and my little brother Rick. No one else. Anyone that listened that day didn't really care. It did not resonate with them. But I did do the broadcast of the game between the Mocs and Appalachian State at Chamberlain Field. But I should have been at my little brother's wedding.
Yeah.
I should have been his best man and probably given the worst speech ever. But I would have been there. So that's one of those things I look back upon and I just go, you know what? Was it really worth it? The risk reward, was it really worth doing that game and not being at Rick's wedding that day? And I said, you know what? That was a bad mistake. And probably I haven't made many that big, but I probably made other mistakes similar to that along the way.
Well, and we all get very ambitious in our career. So that's where I think your advice of slow down a little bit is well worth it.
Well, I couldn't get that ambitious because I'm still at the same place. So
well, you've done
how'd that ambition help me?
Chattanooga Sports Hall of Fame, the Tennessee Broadcasters Hall of Fame. If I got that correct?
Yeah,
yes.
You're in so far.
Absolutely right. Jim, fascinating. I'm glad we got to talk, get to know you a little bit better. We all hear you every morning, but it's nice to get you to get some words in other than some of your co-hosts.
Yeah, that doesn't happen very often.
No. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and look forward to seeing you again.
I appreciate the invitation, and again, once you get on that schedule,
I know
you're in.
I was in. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.